Hello and welcome back, recording from a slightly different location here. In today's review, we are connecting training prescription into the molecular signaling pathways, which you can see right here. You can sort of read as going from things like heart rate zones and interval design into AMPK, PGC1 alpha, and overtraining. FYI, there is some overlap with this lecture and the next, so some concepts you may not have gotten to yet. That is fine. Again, remember using this pyramid to structure your thinking, Bloom's taxonomy. Questions, they stimulate you to basically perform exactly the thinking you would need for exams and in the real world with training and exercise decisions. So, here we go. Question 1. Which overload strategy best targets intramuscular phosphagen stores? Starting you off with a pretty straightforward one, but it is technically at apply level. So is it A, long duration steady state exercise, B, moderate continuous aerobic training, C, short maximal effort bouts with full recovery, D, low intensity recovery sessions, or E, high volume resistance? And of course that answer is short maximal efforts with full recovery, which specifically stresses ATP and phosphocreatine availability, which drives those adaptations in the phosphagen storage and that quick resynthesis capacity. All right, question 2. Which feature distinguishes intermittent interval training from continuous training? Lower energy expenditure, reduced cardiovascular strain, reduced metabolic stress, planned recovery allowing higher work intensity, or shorter training time? And this one is a D, planning recovery allowing a higher work intensity. So interval training is defined by intentional recovery periods that allow repeated bouts at higher intensities that could not be sustained continuously. All right, moving up a little now into level 4. Why is interval training particularly effective for improving glycolytic capacity? Is it that it A, sorry, it says B there, suppresses oxidative enzymes, B, maximizes continuous ATP demand, C, reduces lactate formation, D, repeatedly stresses high ATP turnover, or E, minimizes phosphocreatine depletion? And that answer is D, repeatedly stresses high rate ATP turnover. Those repeated high intensity bouts stress quick ATP turnover through glycolysis, stimulating those adaptations in those glycolytic enzymes and the buffering capacity. All right, question 4. Which factor most strongly explains individual variability in aerobic training response? Is it A, training frequency, B, training intensity, C, genetics, D, training duration, or E, exercise modality? And yeah, this one is frustrating in terms of the genetics answer. Yes, genetic differences do strongly influence how individuals adapt to aerobic training, even when training variables are fairly standardized. But we do need to kind of go on a side note here on VO2 max, because that's basically what we're talking about here in genetics. So while genetics may significantly influence your overall potential peak in your VO2 max that you can achieve, structured training improves aerobic capacity and performance and overall health in everyone regardless. You know, I'm never going to slam dunk a basketball. I just don't have that genetics. It's kind of the similar thing here. It doesn't mean you can't exercise and enjoy and perform well in whatever sport you want to do. So in the world of exercise physiology and you're competing in a race, if someone else has a higher VO2 max, it doesn't mean they're going to win that race. The race outcome depends far more than just VO2 max alone. Yes, genetics may affect how much the VO2 max changes in terms of the absolute number, but your training, quality, consistency, your tactics, your form, your technique, and those sport-specific skills play a much larger role in who actually wins that game or race. So again, some more ways to think about this. That top peak VO2 max ceiling, those random people out there that can hit 80s and 90s in terms of their VO2 max may exist due to genetics, but it's not the effort. It's not the progress that you make in your training. It's not those meaningful aerobic adaptations. That's going to affect the entire population equally with the appropriate training. So if I haven't driven home this point enough, genetics influence a degree of aerobic adaptation, but structured training improves performance in everybody. Genetics may help explain different responses in terms of the science of things, and that's all the more reason why individualized training is the solution, not just, whatever, I'm going to give up, I'm never going to win that race. Success in sport reflects your training quality, not genetics alone. So don't give up if you find out you do not have a high VO2 max. I don't have a very high VO2 max myself. All right, question 5. Which signaling pathway is most closely associated with calcium-mediated endurance adaptations? It is AMPK, is it NF-kappa beta, is it CaMK, is it P38 MAPK, or is it adenylate kinase? And this one is calcium calmodulin dependent kinase. This is not something that we cover all that much in a lecture, but I wanted to review this with you. CaMK responds to those repeated calcium transients during endurance exercise and drives that gene expression related to oxidative adaptation. So it is very important. Question 6. Which molecular signal reflects oxidative stress and also participates in adaptive signaling? So you got to think of both of those. Is it AMP, ATP, ROS, reactive oxygen species, calcium, or lactate? And that one's ROS. Yes, reactive oxygen species both indicate oxidative stress and act as signaling molecules that stimulate those endogenous antioxidants and mitochondrial adaptation. So this is why there's been some studies out there that started to push back on taking high doses of vitamin C and vitamin E and other antioxidants before you train, because you might blunt or hamper your own endogenous antioxidant response as well as the training response. All right, we're moving up to level 5, the evaluate level. Why is RPE particularly useful for prescribing aerobic exercise intensity across diverse populations? Is it A, it directly reflects VO2, B, it eliminates heart rate variability, C, is unaffected by fatigue, D, integrates physiological and psychological strain, or E, reflects only metabolic demand? And this one is D. It integrates physiological and psychological strain. So RPE integrates signals from cardiovascular, respiratory, muscular, central nervous systems, all impacting your overall feeling, your perception of fatigue from those systems, making it very valuable when heart rate, for example, could be altered by a medication you might be on, the heat outside, your level of fatigue or hydration, how much caffeine you took in. So don't go just based on heart rate. RPE is very effective. Question 8. Why are exercise mimetics like AICAR considered physiologically incomplete substitutes for training? This one's an interesting one. Is it because they increase injury risk? Do they fail to activate mechanical loading pathways? Do they overstimulate insulin release? Do they suppress mitochondrial enzymes, or do they reduce VO2 max? So this one's B. They just don't load your body mechanically. There is no good pill that's a substitute for true exercise. An exercise mimetic might stimulate some intracellular pathways like AMPK, but they do not activate those mechanical as well as neuromuscular signals, which is really essential for an actual true training adaptation. So there are pills out there, and we are learning more and more about the exercise signaling pathways, and there are things that might stimulate your PGC1 alpha or AMPK pathways by taking a pill, but you're not going to get the true training response. Question 9. GW501516, or a PPAR delta agonist, raised ethical concerns primarily because it what? Caused acute cardiovascular collapse, B, improved endurance without training, C, increased muscle mass dramatically, D, suppressed insulin secretion, or E, reduced fat oxidation. We covered this a little bit, but again, if you're not quite familiar with this, please review and read about PPAR agonists. They are very interesting in terms of this whole exercise mimetics world. GW501516 did improve endurance performance to a certain extent by almost scarily altering gene expression that relates to fat oxidation, which really does raise significant ethical concerns due to potential cheating and performance enhancement without training. So if you're already an athlete and you have done and performed and undergone the mechanical and neuromuscular signaling that we just talked about in the previous question, and now basically this is considered another form of doping, you're trying to rig your response, game the response, just like when people well, do blood doping, that is illegal. That's why PPAR is not a safe drug to take and is banned and is illicit, and you should not take it. And question 10, which taper strategy best supports peak performance? Is it A, eliminating training completely? I've done that many times. B, maintaining volume and reducing intensity. C, reducing volume while maintaining intensity. D, reducing both volume and intensity fairly significantly or drastically. Or E, increase frequency with lower intensity. And this one's kind of an interesting one. It starts kind of at level 3 and kind of brings you up as you think about it. It's actually that sweet spot of reducing volume while maintaining intensity, which does lower accumulated fatigue without necessarily sacrificing those physiologic adaptations, which does end up supporting optimal performance. The taper is something that is really fascinating, but this has absolutely been shown to be, in theory, the best way. I don't really like this. I've tried it myself, and it just doesn't feel good to really keep maintaining the intensity while reducing the volume. I am kind of more of a volume person. That just feels better to me. And there are some slight tweaks in it, but in theory, reducing your volume while maintaining the intensity is the best way to taper if you really want to perform at your best. All right, that's it. See you in the next video.